In the Code of Canon Law, precisely Canon 1055, marriage is described or defined as a sacrament. And in the second paragraph of it, marriage is also called a contract. So marriage is both a sacrament and a contract. And indeed, in the second paragraph said, there cannot be a valid contract between the baptized without, by its fact, being a sacrament. Meaning, to obtain sacramentality of marriage, the marriage contract must be valid. But where the marriage contract is invalid, there is no sacrament. Issue of nullity borders around the contract. Where you have an invalid contract, then you can talk of nullity. Marriage as a contract is a juridic act and must follow three fundamental principles. For the validity of a juridic act, the first thing is that the act must be performed by people who are qualified by law. And that is the institution of pediments, that the man and the woman do not suffer from impediment. They must be free from impediment. They must be qualified to marry. And the second thing is that the essential element of marriage must be performed. What are the essential elements? The essential constituent is the consent. And the consent must be consent to what? Consent to consortio tutus vitae, partnership of whole life. There must be consent to bonum prolis, the good of children, that is procreation and education of children. There must be consent to the good of the spouse, bonum coniugum. So the consent must constitute essential elements of marriage. It's not enough to say, I take you to be my wife. Taking you, these marital vows must also constitute those essential elements that are made up of marriage, that is partnership of whole life, the good of the spouse, procreation and education of children. Then finally, the requirements and formalities stipulated by law must be followed. That is what we call canonical form. In the event where any of this is lacking, if the persons that enter the marriage are not legally qualified, or they suffer an impediment, or there is defect in the consent. Defect of the consent means these essential elements of marriage was excluded, or any of them was excluded by positive act of the will. You have defect of the consent. Or the formalities, that is the canonical form, was not observed without due dispensation. Then the contract itself will be invalid. However, Canon 124 paragraph 2 says that a juridic act that has been placed in act correctly is presumed to be valid. Meaning that if two persons come before the church's minister and exchange their matrimonial consent, the marriage is presumed valid from the point of view of law. But however, such a presumption is called simple presumption, meaning if there is doubt as to whether that marriage entered is valid or not, the couples are advised to present their doubt to the church through the tribunal, and the tribunal will look into it and see whether any of the elements essential for the validity of the marriage and consequently for the sacramentality of the marriage is omitted.